Alex Hormozi built $100 million plus business by mastering one financial metric that he calls a license to print money. And that metric is your lifetime gross profit to your client acquisition cost. And so while that's great for Hormozi, I know 90% of the agencies are not tracking this metric simply because they don't know where to start. And so I will make sure we put a stop to that, because for the agencies that we are tracking this metric, we've seen just how powerful it can be. Take one of our clients who went from 70k MRR all the way to 150k MRR in just 2 months, or another one who went from 80k MRR to now over 200k MRR without dropping his profit margins by even 1%. And so for the agencies that mastered this metric, growth becomes almost more like a math equation where they can influence their growth by tactfully scaling spend up and down to maximize not only their revenue, but also their profits. And this puts them in a very powerful position where they know exactly which levers to pull to grow at a much higher rate than their competitors. My name is Joey DeWitt and I run AgenCFO, where we help agencies take full control of their finances so they can scale profitably. And in this video, I will share exactly how Hormozi used this equation to do just that in his businesses. However, I will explain the exact context you need to know to apply that in your agency. Plus, I'll be showing and giving away a simple calculator that we even use ourselves and for our clients to calculate this metric, so you can just easily plug in your own numbers and see exactly where you stand and what this is all about. So by the end of this video, you'll not only understand what this metric can mean for your agency, but also how you can move the levers that influence this to also help you grow at a faster rate than you ever dreamt of. By the end of this video, you'll not only understand how to calculate this metric, but you will also know how to implement this in your agency so that you can also benefit from this license to print money. But before we get into the weeds and into the calculator, I just want to take a few minutes to explain this relationship between lifetime gross profit and client acquisition cost and tell you a little bit more about the individual components that go into this formula. And so that's what we have here on the screen, where on the left side we see lifetime gross profit and on the right side we have client acquisition cost. First, I'll tell you in simple terms what this is all about. So starting with lifetime gross profit, what this means is just how much profit you can expect to make from the average client that you bring into your agency. So this is the profit after paying for the delivery team and maybe any specific softwares that you have to fulfill the service for this client, and then that multiplied by the number of months that the client stays. And so this is vitally important to know, because if you can confidently tell me how much money you will make from the average client, then I can tell you how much you can spend to acquire these clients and still have enough left over for your software cost, your own salaries, maybe any other reinvestments you want to make, and just run a profitable agency. And that's why this is so key to know, because now if you take a step back and just think about the relationship between this, like if you know that it costs you $1,000 to get a client, and then you know that you will make maybe 5,000 to, or after you've delivered the service for the client, then you have a very powerful equation on your hand where you know that you can keep increasing your sales spend and your growth budget as long as you're still earning enough from the clients that you acquire. And this is where it becomes a license to print money, because if you can now maximize the lifetime gross profit or anything you earn on these clients, that means that you can outspend all your competitors to acquire the clients, and you can acquire so many clients, and as long as you're still profiting enough from them, your business will grow at a rate that you never thought was possible. So with that said, let's go into the weeds of this formula and tell a little bit more what these components actually mean. Starting with lifetime gross profit. This is simply your lifetime value times your gross profit margin. Lifetime value, this is just the revenue that you earn from a client over the lifetime. So that's your average retainer times the retention. Meaning if a client stays for you for 6 months on average and they pay you 6K on average per month, then you have a lifetime value of 36,000. But not all of that revenue is actually profit. If you pay the team a lot of money to deliver this service, you actually, have a much lower lifetime gross profit. And that's what we're trying to see here. So your gross profit margin on a client is just the revenue you earn minus the costs that you have to deliver it, which might be freelancers or your service team. If you have a structure where you pay just a percentage of revenue to the team, then this is very easy to calculate. If you have a structure where you have paid like salaries and people work on multiple clients, then it will require maybe a little bit of corrections and calculations to find out what that true split is on a client. However, this is not a difficult thing to do. And if you just sit down an hour or so, you can figure out indeed, for the average client, how much of the money that you pay your service team should kind of go to that one client. If you do that across the board, you find your average gross profit margin, and then you will be able to calculate what the lifetime gross profit is. Keep these things in mind, because we will get back to this later, where you can see how these are the levers that you need to influence if you want to make more money. And so that can be by raising the retainers, increasing retention, or lowering your cost. On the other hand, we have client acquisition cost. And so again, from the highest level, this is just the sales cost that you have divided over the clients that you've signed. Clients signed should be easy. You know how many clients you're signing. This could be your sales calls times your close rate, or just, the number of invoices you're sending out to new clients in a given month. That you need to have divided by sales cost. And this is a little bit of a trickier number, where in some cases, if you have a whole sales team, this might be a little bit easier, where it could just be the salaries of the sales team and any marketing spend, like ad spend, and maybe any other outreach you're doing. But in most cases, and for most agencies, we still see the founder doing a lot of the sales. And so here, if you want to get a truly accurate CAC, you should attribute some of your own salary or drawings to these sales costs. And so one good way to do this is just to kind of see what a typical market rate would be to hire someone to do that work for you. So if you have a if you're doing all the closing, then maybe you want to put 5K or 10K a month to take over that work from you as a closer, because that's where this is often the point that agencies get stuck, is that they do all of the work themselves and then they become the bottleneck, and then they refuse to scale beyond that because they don't want to give up the margin to hire a sales team, hire an appointment setter, start doing more ad spend. But that is where, again, this relationship come into play, because if you have undeniable proof that you are acquiring clients at a profitable rate, and then because you're delivering so well for them and you're retaining them and you're making enough profit from them, then that will be the justification that you need to make these investments into the sales side, because you know that you are still having a profitable growth engine going on. I hope that is very clear of what the components are and how you should think about this equation. Then now let's look at a real example of how you can calculate this by going through our template. And that is what we have here. So let's go through these numbers so you know exactly how you can use this and where you have to get this information from to fill this out and see where your agency stands right now. Starting at the top, we have lifetime value. This is, as mentioned, the average retainer times the number of months that a client stays. This is stuff you should know, from the top of your head. This should roll right off the tongue. You need to know this stuff. So let's say your average retainer is 3.5K and maybe a client stays for 6 months on average. Now I will record another video of how you can really calculate this number, but most agency owners, they have a good grasp of this. They know kind of how long a client stays on average. And so for this exercise, you can kind of guesstimate it. You shouldn't be too far off unless you have a very different view of your agency than really is. But let's say a client on average stays for 6 months, then that's what you fill in. So that would give you a lifetime value of 21K. Then let's look at the cost that you have to deliver for this client. Now, I already put the inputs for common roles that we see with our agency clients. So they have account managers, media buyers, designers, and maybe any service software. If you have different roles, feel free to either just change the names here or even just ignore the names and fill in the numbers here that you have. So in this case, we just put in some numbers here. As I mentioned, if you have fixed salaries or maybe like larger salaries that cover multiple clients, which is usually the case, then you can again just kind of like take a split of that. So if this is a 7.5K role who works on 10 clients, then we should put 750 for each individual client. Now, that will give us our average gross profit per client, but also our gross margin. And that's what we see here. Now, for most agencies, I want to keep gross margin above 60%. I have another video where I talk more about kind of the margins of an agency, so you can check that out. But otherwise, for now, just know around 60%, that's usually a good number. This will give us our lifetime gross profit. To reiterate this number tells us that for the average client we bring in, we can expect to earn just over 12K in profit that we can use to grow the business. Very good number to keep in mind. Then we can start looking at our CAC. So here we can input all of these sales costs we have, and then how many clients we typically acquire during the period that these costs occur. So I just recommend put in the average monthly cost that you have for the sales side, and then here you can input how many clients you sign on average, which will give you your CAC. What you see for agencies is that this is indeed usually between like the 1 and 2K mark. We have clients that are quite a bit below this. We have clients that are quite a bit above this. But as you can kind of guess from this whole video and from this number, is that it really doesn't matter where your CAC is, or even it doesn't matter where your lifetime gross profit is. All that matters is that this relationship is strong, because maybe you have to spend 15,000 to acquire a client. But if this client is a Fortune 500 company that pays you 50K a month and locks in on a 12-month contract, then you're going to have a lifetime gross profit that is through the roof. Whereas maybe in another case, if you can acquire clients for like $500, but they only pay you 1,000 and stay for 2 months, then you're not going to have a lifetime gross profit that's too strong. So the numbers don't matter, the relationship is key. And then we get the number here at the bottom. So anything over 3 is acceptable. If you're below 3, you're cutting it very close, because it simply doesn't leave that much money to pay for all of the other operational costs and your own salary. Anything below 3, that means you need to take a very hard look at all of these inputs to see how you can either raise them or lower them to strengthen the metrics and increase the total number. So anything above 3, that's where you want to be. We have clients who are more around the 10 to 1 range. According to Hormozi, he even had a time, I believe, where he was around 100 to 1. That is possible. I haven't seen it myself yet, but I'd love to get there at some point. We have seen some clients in the 20 to 30 range, especially those who just only get clients from referrals. I think that's a little bit cheating in some cases, because they simply won't have a very high CAC unless they pay very high referral fees. But yeah, I think anything between 3 and 20 is a very nice number to be, especially if you're really investing in the sales side. This template will be in the description that you can just download and quickly fill out to see exactly where you stand, and then you know if you are in need to fix some of these points, or if you actually have a very profitable engine and all you need to do is more, because that's where this becomes very interesting. Like if you're at a 10, like almost an 11, that is very good. That is very good. So the question then is like, well, why can't you just do a lot more of that? Like, let's say you, instead of aiming for this 1.1 CAC, maybe you're gonna drop 50K in 50K in advertising. You will sign some more clients, maybe not as much. So now you go to 1.5, and now you're still acquiring clients super profitably. So maybe you can increase it again. And this way you can really like scale up, and like you have now a clear stop to watch for, to know that you're still in a profitable stage. But now if you bring in too many clients, the service degrades, clients leave sooner, now it goes to 3. Now it's like, okay, hey, we've dipped too much, we need to reassess again, we need to scale back. And so that's why ideally you track this number not just in the moment, but actually month over month, so you can see the trend and make sure that you are staying strong. Then, with all of that said, I want to go over a couple extra insights that are specific for the agency space that you need to keep in mind as you're starting to think about this metric. And the first one is a very important one, and this is to keep your service model in mind. And when I talk about service model, I'm specifically talking about the type of contracts that you have, which are usually either retainer-based contracts or project-based contracts. And so this is for you if you offer both types of services, because a key mistake that you can make here is that you treat both as the same. You have maybe projects that might be just 1 month or 3 months, and you just apply the same metrics to them as retainers who can stay for 6 months or 12 months. And so if you just group everything together, and you might get to a certain lifetime gross profit and a certain CAC that works for everything as a whole, maybe you will find that you have like a 15,000 lifetime gross profit because some of your retainer clients stay for very long, then you can say like, hey, I can easily spend up to like 3K to acquire a client. That's all fine. However, if now you start spending more on ads, and you start acquiring clients at the 3K mark, but you don't really pay attention to the fact that most of these clients might be one-off project clients who only pay you maybe 3K for a one-off project, then now all of a sudden you are losing money because most of the clients you bring in don't actually earn you 15K lifetime gross profit. And so if you have both one-off services and retainer services, then it's very important to track this pretty much for both separately, so that you know how much you can invest in acquisition to get a project client and how much you can invest to get a retainer client. It's a very important difference that is easy to overlook and could result in you just getting clients at a negative rate. The second question is to pay attention to cash flow. Now, this applies to any business, not just agencies, but it's super important, because that is the one risk of this metric, that we're talking about the lifetime gross profit of a client, which could be 6 months, could be 12 months. And so let's say you have a very long retention, you keep clients for 2 years. And so, you might think, I can spend a lot of money to get these clients in because in the long run, I'll be profitable. Then you'd be 100% correct, but you could still run out of money, because good chance is that you won't be profitable in the first month. Like, let's say they pay you only 2K a month, but they stay for 24 months, then if you spend 5K to get the client, you'd still be profitable over the lifetime, but it will take you 2 to 3 months to even recoup that initial investment. And so if you don't have very deep pockets or a sugar daddy that can front you the money, what you will find is that you dig yourself in this very deep hole very quickly, because you are just out of cash because you're just fronting the money. So very important to still look at kind of the cash ROAS, as they call it, or it's like how the return on the first month, because if that is negative, then you do need to be careful about cash flow, that you're not digging yourself into a hole with this. Lastly, the third thing for agencies to pay attention to is the type of agency that you run, because this metric does not necessarily apply equally across all agencies. I see two clear distinctions here. One are the agencies that are more a revenue generating service. These agencies typically have a lower CAC, but also a lower lifetime value, because since you're selling money, it's usually easy to bring clients in, but there's also a higher chance that you can't get them the result they want and they leave quicker. So if you're just looking at like CAC and lifetime value, then be aware of the type of agency you run. Because if it is very revenue driven, then you might indeed have lower numbers there. But again, as long as the ratio is strong, you can still scale that very quickly. Because on the other side, you have more the retention-based agencies like email marketing or PR services. For them, it's often more expensive to get the client, but then once they're in, they usually retain them for a longer period of time. And so again, higher CAC, higher lifetime value, higher lifetime gross profit. Ratio can be the same, that's what you should compare. But if you're looking at just the hard numbers, know that it can be quite different. And so there you have it, Alex Hormozi's powerful formula translated specifically for your agency. This is not just some theoretical stuff. This is just an actual practical tool that you can immediately use to make better decisions about scaling, pricing, service delivery, and client acquisition. I want to make this super easy for you to implement. That's why I added that calculator we just went through below in the description. You can just download it for free, no strings attached, no opt-in required. Just plug in your numbers and see exactly where you stand and what you need to do to turn this into your license to print money. Now, if you found this helpful, then appreciate it if you can hit the like button and drop a comment to let me know if you were already tracking this or what the net ratio is that you are hitting now. Now, if you want even more content around optimizing your finances, then check out some of my other videos. Specifically, the first one I did is where I break down the entire sort of financial view of an agency. And that's where we also touch on this metric, but also many other metrics and ways that you can make more money and save more money with your agency. With that said, thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one.